Welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how I set up a new Windows 10 PC to be ready for all my courses and training videos. In particular, this video will be focused on common tools and the general setup for Windows 10. As I just mentioned, this will serve as a baseline starting point for all my courses, training videos, and tutorials. This also happens to be a collection of very short and easy topics that really don't justify their own videos. And to be completely honest, this entire video is completely skippable if you feel more comfortable installing everything yourself. The main point is to serve as documentation for those that want to mirror my setup exactly. For other tools, they will have their own videos since they will appear later in my setup or require a bit more depth. For those of you watching on YouTube, I will provide timecodes in the description below. Also, as mentioned, since this is part of a greater installation process, this video is just the starting point to a larger playlist. I'm going to cover how to access your system's About page and the display settings page. Then I'll set up the Start menu group called Tools by adding a link to the Services app, sometimes used in some of my courses. After that, we will use Microsoft Edge to install Google Chrome, followed by installing the Windows Terminal from the Microsoft Store. Then we will finish things off by installing a few text editors. These are completely optional if you already have your preferred text editor installed. However, I will be installing Notepad++, Atom, and Visual Studio Code, since they are all free and have their own advantages. Again, if you are so inclined, feel free to skip ahead to the next video in the playlist or the course. Before we get started, I wanted to point out that I do all my recordings on a 4K monitor. I realize that everyone has different equipment, so adjust your settings accordingly. For the most part, I need to ensure that everything remains very readable on a wide variety of devices, so my settings might look a bit crazy to some. Well, that sums up the intro section. Now let's get on to the demos. Alright, let's get started by looking at our Windows 10 About page and then dive into the display settings, just to confirm that we have the correct resolution. I'm currently on a fresh install of Windows 10. Before we go any further, I want to look at our display settings to make sure that my monitor is set up correctly with the correct resolution. So anywhere on the desktop, right-click, then choose from Display Settings from the pop-up menu. Once there, we just want to confirm that our scaling is set to 100%, and that you have the expected displayed resolution. In this case, this is the resolution for a 4K monitor. Go ahead and close out of that. Next, let's look at our About page. Go to the search field on the taskbar and simply search for About. It should be among the first results. So click on that. And this should bring up our System's About page. Now, what's important about this is to make sure that we're running the right platform or system type. In this case, it's a 64-bit operating system on a 64-based processor. These two really should be in agreement. Or it'll be 32 and 32, but sometimes you might see 64 and 32. In that case, you would be running a 32-bit operating system on a 64-bit processor, but that's much more uncommon these days. This is important because we want to make sure we choose the correct software for our operating system. After that, what also might be pertinent is the addition of Windows, in my case, Windows 10 Pro, although for the software we'll be installing today, that really won't matter that much. The other thing is version. In this case, it's 20H2. Now, you might be tempted to wonder, hey, isn't 10 the version of Windows? And these days, it really isn't. Windows 10 has been Windows 10 for many years now. So, really, it's more like a brand. And then the version is actually this number here, or this signifier, which means that this is the second half update from 2020. In the future, you might see, a different number. Next, I'm going to set up a link to the Windows Services app, and in doing so, set up the Tool Startup menu group. Back on Windows, I have currently taken the liberty of getting rid of all the installation bloatware. So you might want to take some time to get rid of that before we do this. After doing that, you'll get a fairly streamlined Windows menu. So what we want to do is go down here and find Windows Administrative Tools. Now, I don't use Windows services in all of my courses, but sometimes I do. And so it's useful to have a services app readily accessible. So I'm going to expand this out and then scroll down until you find the item called Services. Right-click on that item and simply click on Pin to Start. That will open up a new section of our Start menu, which is basically an unnamed group. So if we hover over, we can see we have New Group. It disappears when we hover away from it. Here we go. So what we want to do is actually give this group a name by clicking on that and typing in the name that we want to use. I'm going to name this Tools. Once done, press Enter. Great. Now we have a Tools Start menu group. Now, let's turn our attention to one of our first installations of software, the Windows Terminal. In the past, I would set up the Windows command line and PowerShell as separate entries. However, I have since discovered that the Windows Terminal provides an easy way to access pretty much any terminal-based environment. So that's what we'll do. Back on Windows 10, we need to install the Windows Terminal from the Microsoft Store. I can easily access that by going to the search on the taskbar and simply typing Store. It should be the first item called Microsoft Store. Simply launch that. And of course, we'll be greeted with the Microsoft Store. Within the Store app, click on Search. Within the search field, type Terminal. Then press Enter. One of the first items should be Windows Terminal. Let's click onto that. Now, from here, click on Install. We don't actually need to sign in to the Microsoft Store, so I'm going to close out. Great. Once the product is installed, we can go ahead and close the Microsoft Store. And now go to the Start menu to find the Windows Terminal item. It should be under Recently Added. While we are here, let's go ahead and add this to our Start menu and the taskbar. Right-click, then Pin to Start. All right, let's go ahead and move this into our Tools group. Now let's return to the Windows Terminal item. Right-click again. Under More, find the item Pin to Taskbar. Great. Now the Windows Terminal is available from the Start menu under our Tools group and from our taskbar. Let's fire it up and see what it looks like. By default, it launches into PowerShell. It's not a big deal. We can easily add in another terminal by using the down arrow and invoking Windows Command Prompt. What's great is they're separate tabs, which I really enjoy. However, on my monitor, this is really small, so I'm going to fix that. I'll close out one of those. And with the drop down, I'm going to go to Settings. We'll start up here in Startup, which is the first item, and we'll scroll all the way down and adjust our launch size. I've determined that I want a little bit more width to this, so I'm going to set it at 150 columns. And I know I can get away with a few more rows, so I'll set it to 40 rows. Click Save. Now what we need to do is for each of our profiles, we need to adjust the font setting. I'm going to click on the Windows PowerShell first. Then go to Appearance. For the font size, I want to adjust it to 36. Go ahead and save. And now I'm going to do the same thing for the command prompt profile. Just click on it, go to Appearance, font size of 36. And let's save that now. All right, well, let's close out of Windows Terminal completely to test our settings. With Windows Terminal completely closed out, let's reopen it. All right, obviously I misjudged this. That's okay. I can go back into Settings, and if I remember correctly, actually this should be 30, not 36. I could have edited this out, but this sometimes is a trial and error process. I might have to readjust this screen just so that I have access to the save button again. Okay, great. Now that those settings have been saved, I'm going to close out and let's test it out again. All right. So my goal was simply to take up the majority of my screen and have fairly legible text. Both the PowerShell and command prompt look like they're set up roughly about the same. All right, great. That concludes this section. Okay, great. Now let's install Google Chrome. To be fair, the default web browser that comes with your operating system will be just fine for the courses. However, I like to keep things consistent, and if you want to follow along with me exactly, then install Chrome like I do. Right now, the only browser that I have available is Microsoft Edge, so I will bring that up. Once I get past the intro screens for it, because this is a brand new system, once again cementing the reason why I'm using Chrome instead of Edge. Once you get to an address bar, go to google.com/Chrome. You should be presented with a Download Chrome button somewhere prominently on the page. Click on that to download the installer. Once the installer has completed downloading, let's go ahead and invoke that to run the installer. Of course, Windows will prompt me for whether or not I actually want to do this, which I do. And now we're installing Chrome. Once the installation is complete, Chrome will automatically start. All right. At this point, I can safely close Edge. I'm going to take a minute to resize my window here. There we go. That looks good. So now I'm going to go through a little bit of the getting started wizard here. I'm going to skip through this. I'm going to skip through that. Once I get to the page about setting Chrome as my default, that is something I do want to do. So I'll click this little button to allow me to do that. It's not going to set Chrome to the default immediately, I have to go under the default apps and then go under web browser and choose another web browser by clicking on the existing one, which should give me my other options. And I'll choose Google Chrome. It'll prompt me to make sure, and of course I want to switch anyway. Great. I close out of this page and then continue. For this one, I want no thanks. And there we go. Now, before we finish up this one, I want to go into my little triple dots here. That gets to the settings, and go to settings. You can see right now everything is super small on my display. That's fine. I can fix that. Go under appearance, then to page zoom. So here you can choose whatever you want, but I like rocking at about 150. That seems like a good balance between readability and overkill. All right, there's no real way to save my settings. It's automatically saved once I've made that selection. All right, let's go ahead and close out of here. Now, we already have a desktop icon. So what I want to do is add that to my taskbar and also the start menu. I'm going to right-click on the icon. Then one of these items should be pinned to start. Let's start with that one. And while I'm here, I'll do the pin to taskbar as well. Right-click, then pin to taskbar. All right, great. So we should see Google Chrome down here. And now if we expand out our start menu, we can see it in its own little area. Let's go ahead and move this up to the tools grouping. Great. Now we're on to our first text editor, Notepad++, which I like a lot more than the default Notepad. So back on Windows, let's fire up Google Chrome. The Notepad++ website is simply notepad plus plus.org. Once there, go to the download page and simply download the latest version, which should be toward the top. Once on the download page, be careful to select the version that you need for your operating system. In this case, I want the 64-bit version. So I'm going to scroll down until I find that installer. Here we go. All right, once downloaded, I'm going to run the installer. And there really isn't much to customize here. So I'm just going to speed through and I'll point out where something needs to change. I do want the installer to automatically add the shortcut to the desktop. So I'll check that. All right, now let's install. All right, that's great. I'll go ahead and let the installer open Notepad++ for the first time. All right, brilliant. While we have Notepad++ open, oh, by the way, we don't need Chrome anymore, so we'll close that out for now. All right, let's go back to Notepad++. I want to take the opportunity to increase the size of the default font that's used. So to do that, anywhere in the document that's currently open, which is the changelog, hold down the Control and the plus button simultaneously to increase the font. As I do this more times, the font just grows. I think I'll do it one more time. There we go. The user interface is still pretty small, but the font for the contents of the file is really where I want it. That's good enough for now. I will go ahead and close out of Notepad++. Now let's add Notepad++ to our Start menu and the taskbar. This is actually optional depending on how frequently you plan to use Notepad++. All right, I'm going to move this up into Tools. There we go. Go ahead and rearrange a bit. All right, now for one of my favorite text editors, the Atom text editor, which is from the GitHub project. I find it to be an excellent text editor for geeks and hackers, since it's super customizable. Let's open our web browser and go to atom.io. Once that page loads, it should detect that you're running Windows and the specific platform you're on, that is 64-bit or 32-bit. If it does, go ahead and click on the download button to begin the download. Once the download is complete, let's go ahead and run it. There's really not much to do here, just wait for Atom to complete installing. All right, once Atom has finished installing, it will automatically launch. And so now we can resize a bit. Let me go ahead and take a moment to close our web browser. All right. Looks like a good size. I'm going to go ahead and close out any of these initial screens. All right, great. Let's close Atom just for now. And I want to make sure Atom gets added to my taskbar and the Start menu, since I'm going to use it pretty frequently. Right-click on the icon, which should be on the desktop, pin to Start, then pin to taskbar. All right, great. Let me go ahead and shuffle things around. Super. Now let's launch Atom once again, except this time what I want to do is want to make sure that the Atom command is available from our command prompt and from PowerShell. So I'm going to open up Windows Terminal. And from here, I want to simply type Atom. And then I'll go ahead and specify period, which means to open the current directory. Great. This opens Atom in such a way that this tree view over here shows my current home directory. Great, which is exactly what I want, because next we're going to modify the settings that display how big everything is. So in order to do that, since Atom is based on web-based technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the settings are actually a cascading style sheet. So if you go to File, then down to Style Sheet, that loads in a style sheet that controls how Atom looks. The first one I want to do is modify this tree view, which is right over here. To do that, I'm going to go in and then use the style sheet property font dash size. And I want to use the relative size of 1.5 EM. Now, I could use absolute pixels as well, but I have found that I really like the relative sizing. So if I end up resizing my screen for some reason, that it will adjust accordingly. At the end of that property, end it with a semicolon. And now, if I save it with Control S, it instantly applies the larger setting. All right, let's go down here to the Atom text editor. And within here, we'll do the same thing. Font size, property, but this time I want to specify 2.5 EM. End with a semicolon and then Control S to save. There we go. That looks pretty nice. All right, let's close out and make sure it loads up as we expect. I'm going to go ahead and close out of Atom. And this time I will start up a new command prompt session. And I'll just do the same thing. I just wanted to verify that Atom launches from PowerShell and the Windows command prompt. And voila, it has. Again, if we go to Style Sheet, it retains our previous settings, which is great. I'm going to close out of that for now. Finally, probably my favorite text editor right now is Visual Studio Code. While Atom is great for hacking because it's infinitely customizable, Visual Studio Code provides a more comprehensive editing experience pretty much immediately. All right, let's bring up our web browser. And simply type VS Code. You should find a link that begins with code.visualstudio.com. This is the official website of Visual Studio Code. Once the web page loads, it should detect that you're on Windows and offer you the stable download by default. So let's go ahead and do that. Once the installer has finished downloading, let's go ahead and run it. All right, let's go ahead and accept. And there really isn't much to customize here, so I'll let you know when there is. Once on this page, I do like to add all the items because I do want the desktop icon as well as the integration at the File Explorer level. I'll click Next. And after reviewing our options, click on Install. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the web browser. Now let's go ahead and allow Visual Studio Code to launch from the installer as we click Finish. All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and resize. Since this is fairly small and difficult to read, I'm going to go ahead and increase the overall size of everything, which I can do by using the key combination of Control and plus. Control plus. Make sure I've got this selected. Control plus. And it makes everything a little bit bigger. So I'm going to keep doing it until I reach a size I'm pretty content with. As I get it to that level, I'm going to resize it even more so that it's approximately how big I want it to be whenever I'm using it. This looks pretty good. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close out of Visual Studio Code. All right, so now what we want to do is add Visual Studio Code to the taskbar and start menu. So go to the desktop icon, right click, pin to taskbar, then pin to start. Great. Now let's go ahead and adjust things on the start menu. And I'll put it right here. Feel free to rearrange these icons in the way that you will access them the most. Finally, let's make sure that we can access Visual Studio Code from the terminal. So I'm going to go to our Windows terminal. And once PowerShell loads, I'm going to simply use the command code and then a period. That means Visual Studio Code will launch with the current working directory. All right, that's great. I'm going to close out of VS Code, and now we're going to do the same thing for the command prompt. Just confirming everything loads properly. On this welcome page, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck this so I'm not bothered by that again. There we go. Now we can exit out of our terminal.